Hey, everybody. Let's see. I'm going to share my screen with you and going to get something for us to talk about here. All right. Okay. So as we get going, I appreciate all of you who are here. Let me see. Let me see if I can get a chat box kind of thing going and you can let me know you're here. I haven't run a Facebook Live Zoom in a while, so it may just take me just a minute. All right, let's see. All right, we got some people on here. Thank you all for showing up. Okay, what we're going to do today is get started on a series of lives that I want to do that have to do with longevity. And longevity is becoming a bigger and bigger topic because we are living longer than we have ever lived before, which is kind of cool in a way. But what's happening is what we don't want to do is live longer but live sick. So we're going to talk about all of the things that we can do to live longer and but not be ill while we are living longer. So let me just start with a couple of things. A lot of people have a misconception. Let me open this up a little bit of what anti-aging or whatever word you want to use about it or for it is all about. And let's talk about. Can you see my cursor right there? I hope that you can. Anti-aging medicine is often focused with preventing you from looking older as you get older. Let's just call it that. And that has to do with, like Botox injections and plastic surgery and all those kinds of things. Then there is longevity medicine, which is focused with making you live longer, but not necessarily healthier. And then there is something that we're now calling wellness medicine, and that has to do with being healthy as you get older. And that's what we're really wanting, because if you think back to it, I don't know how old you might be, but I know that when I was a kid back in the 60s, it was not unusual for your grandparents to die in their 60s. Something would happen, they'd get an infection or upper respiratory thing, or might have a heart condition or something like that. But what happened was it was not unusual for our grandparents to die in their 60s. Well, now most people are living well into their 80s. And what we don't want to do is we don't want to be getting ill as we age. So let me go over a couple of concepts here. There's something called your chronological age, and chronological age is how old you are. How much time has passed since you were born, since you came out and graced the world with your presence. So there's that. That's how old you are, and you celebrate that every year. Then there is something called your biological age, and the biological age has to do with physiologically how old you are as far as the way your body functions. So let me use an analogy. Let's say that you were going to go out and get yourself a used car, and you were looking at a 5-year-old car, and you would expect a 5-year-old car to, let's say, have probably 60, 70,000 miles on it. That'd be about right for the age of the car. But if you found one that only had about 8 to 10,000 miles on it and had been taken really good care of, then its functional age would be very much less than its chronological age. So think of it kind of like that. A few other definitions that I would like to go over sort of as we get started, and these are here on the page. Mortality, that is the state of being mortal. And we are all mortal unless your name is Elijah. And as far as I can surmise, Elijah is the only person that didn't die. At least that's what the Bible tells us. Elijah was taken up in the sky, so he didn't actually die. The rest of us unfortunately, we are mortal. The next thing is something called morbidity. And that's the condition of suffering from a disease or some other kind of medical condition. Now, the disease could be heart disease. It could be diabetes. It could be something like that that would affect how you age. All right. There's wellness, and wellness is the state of being free from disease. You're well. Longevity, that's how long you live. So if you live until you're 65 or 85 or 95, that is your longevity. Aging, that's the process of gradual physiological deterioration. And we are learning more and more and more, just even as the weeks and months go by, about how to minimize the effect of aging. Okay. Health span. Health span is different than lifespan, right? Lifespan is the health span is the period of life that you are free from major disease and disability. And lifespan is what we're calling the period of healthy aging. And that is, how long do you live before you develop some sort of disease? What we want to do, I've got some pictures here, some diagrams to show you. So let's look at a few examples here. Example number one is, let's say this person lives all the way until they're 100 years old and they never get sick. They just, one night while they're in their sleep, they just don't wake up. So that would be a person that lived, let's say, to 100 years old, and they were not ill. So they did not die from some sort of a disease, or maybe something happened that night. They had a heart attack. Off they go, bam. All right. So the morbidity happened the day before or the night before, let's say they passed away. Example number two would be somebody who around age 20 started to develop diseases. Let's say diabetes. That's the kind of thing that could affect somebody at a fairly young age. And so they would have spent all of their life from the time that they developed the diabetes around age 20 all the way until they died at age 60, being afflicted with diseases. Now, what we know is once you develop one chronic disease, you tend to develop more and more diseases. All right. And then example number three, or back to number two, this would be somebody that they had so much disease going on that their lifespan was actually shortened, that they only lived until they were 60. Example number three would be somebody who around age 20 started to develop some kind of diseases, but they lived until they were 100, but they lived their last 50 years being ill. This is not what we want. What we want is example number one, where we push the disease part as close to how long we live as possible. All right. So look at it like this. We've got a couple other diagrams here that we can look at it. What we want to see is delaying the onset of disease until, if you look at the third example right here, the onset of disease is right up to the very last part where you live well into your 80s and 90s, very healthy, up and about, doing things, and so on and so forth. And then something happens, and it all happens very quickly right at the end. That's what we're looking for. So we want the health span in the bottom two pictures here. We want the health span to go way up into the very latter years, so that something's going to get all of us, unfortunately, at some point. We just want it pushed right up against the end. And that's what we're going to talk about when it comes to longevity. So if you take this whole chart thing and flip it over, then what we want is something like this one down here at the bottom, where we live the majority of our life being very, very healthy. As we get up towards the end, something may develop, and then that's what will take us out. Okay. As we go through the next weeks and months, and I envision this being something that Matt may actually will talk about. I can on Mondays. Monday's a good day for me, and I will always record these, and you can go into my. I'm going to put them up on my website, but you can also go into my YouTube channel, and you can watch them whenever you want to. We're going to go over a lot of things over the next few months. We're going to go over caloric restriction. And these are all things that have been shown to increase longevity and wellness. All right. Caloric restriction has to do with decreasing the amount of calories, obviously, that you take in. But there's also some very powerful things in the research now showing that what we call intermittent fasting is actually really, really good at increasing your health, keeping your blood sugar under control, limiting sugars. And the way that we cook our foods is very important. You know, if you use tobacco or drugs, you know, that's something that you really want to have a big look at that, because that does create problems later on. Alcohol, you know, I think I always shock some of my patients in that I am not an anti-alcohol doctor. I am an anti-too much alcohol. Too much alcohol, when it exceeds your liver's ability to deal with it, that's when it creates a problem. If you want to have a cocktail or a glass of wine, that is not a problem at all. As a matter of fact, there's some recent research just out in the last few weeks that shows that having a drink a day actually increases or is good for your cognition and longevity. It's that when you have too much, it's a problem. Exercise. Exercise is almost a four-letter word for somebody. It's gotten a real negative connotation because for a long period of time, unfortunately, people had this idea that in order to exercise well enough for your health, it took long periods of time. You know, you had to buy special clothes and join a gym and do all this sort of stuff. When it comes to being healthy and longevity, you actually don't have to exercise very much. Just a few minutes a day is enough, and you don't have to have special equipment or anything else to do it. There are medications that actually improve longevity and genetics, like metformin, for example. There are medications that improve your cardiovascular. I'm going to talk about statins because statins have actually proven to be anti-healthy in many, many situations, and we're going to talk about that. There are nutraceuticals or supplements, if you want to use that word, that are very powerful in improving your genetic longevity. Those are things like resveratrol, which is an anti-inflammatory. There are nutraceuticals that support what we call methylation. Methylation is your body's ability to detoxify and get rid of bad stuff that makes you age, okay? Senolytic supplements, these are things like flavonoids, which are very anti-inflammatory, such as coffee. Coffee is actually very good for your brain. We're going to talk about sunlight and radiation exposure. There has been some really, really interesting research come out lately about sun exposure and things like that, and you know, what is bad and what really isn't as bad as we thought for a long time was bad. We're going to talk about social interaction. One of the things I noticed with a lot of my COVID patients is that during the lockdown, the loss of social interaction was had a huge impact on health and especially on cognitive function. We'll talk about the things you can do to keep your brain active. We're going to talk about sleep. You know, you should be able to get a good night's sleep. That's when you repair tissue and things like that. Talk about ways to reduce stress. And we're going to do a lot of talking about all the different facets of diet and things like that. One of the things that I want to give you a perspective here on life expectancy, if you go all the way back to the very beginning of human, thing, this, what they call Africa 50,000 years ago, you can see that by the time people got, what is it? We're off, living past your 20s actually became quite a feat. All right. And then as time went along, you got Europe 15,000 years ago. Then we got during the Roman Empire. You can see that people are living longer and longer. But even at the Roman Empire, during that time, going here at the 50% level, half the population was passing away before they were 40 years old. We go on over here to the 1900s, half the population was still about 60 years old before they passed away. So these are all actually fairly young. As a matter of fact, a little bit of trivia for you, if you don't know this, when Roosevelt, when they put Social Security into effect, and the retirement age was set at 65, the average lifespan in the United States was 63. So you were never actually supposed to get to Social Security. And you can see that kind of borne out right along in here. And but now what we have is you have the average person, if we go here to the 50% level, the average person nowadays in the United States is living until they're about 80 years old, which is a good 20 years longer than when we were kids and we were looking at our grandparents. So that'll give you an idea there. Just a few articles that have come out in support of this. Human potential lifespan predicted based on biology is 120 to 150 years. So when you look at human biology, the biologists will tell us that the human body actually should have the capability of living until around 120 to 150 years. Now that's amazing. And so your body is up for it if we take care of it and treat it like we ought to. We're going to talk about that a lot. Some demographic forecasts suggest that most babies born since the year 2000 will survive to their 100th birthday. You know, just go back a generation. Like I said, go back to when we were kids. Living past your 65th, 70th birthday was a long time. You know, 70 years old was old when I was in grade school. Now they're predicting that the majority of babies that are born since 2000 will survive their 100th birthday. That is a phenomenal thing. Now, I just thought, since we're talking about longevity, let's talk about the oldest documented. Now, there have been claims of other people living longer, but there's no documentation to prove it. But, you know, maybe people have lived longer than this. But this one, Jeanne Calment, she lived until she was 122 years and 164 days. So that's 122 and a half years. The interesting thing is, here's what she did every day. She was woken up at 6:45 in the morning. She started the day with a long prayer at her window. Now, this is important. She started her day with a long prayer at her window. What does that tell you? And what it tells me is the very first thing she did when she got her day going was understand and put her mind in the right perspective about where she was spiritually. That's really very cool. It doesn't matter. It doesn't say what her spiritual predisposition was. It just says that she started every day off with contemplation about who she was and so forth. Then she would do some gymnastics in her chair, wearing a stereo headset. Why is that important? Because temporal lobe stimulation, which is part of what hearing does, is very powerful for your brain. She got herself dressed. She washed herself. She got herself dressed. Didn't need any help. She had braised beef and had dessert with every meal. Well, so much for beef being bad for you. And she even had a dessert. That's interesting. She made herself daily fruit salads, banana, oranges. She ate enough. She enjoyed chocolate. Hey, chocolate's got flavonoids in it. It's good for your brain, just not too much sugar. Okay. She actually would smoke a cigarette and drink a glass of port in the evening after dinner. All right. In the afternoon, she took a nap for 2 hours. Okay. So she recharged her batteries, and then she would visit her neighbors in the care home, telling them about the latest news and stuff. So she was learning, right? And then going out and socializing. So that's important. So if you don't have any social interaction in your life, I'd encourage you to do some, whether you have a book club, you play bridge, you have go to some kind of Bible study thing at your church if you're inclined to do that, but you need some social interaction. Okay. And, and she went to bed at the same, she put her to bed, self to sleep. So you see between 10 and 6:45, she was getting her, 8 hours plus of sleep every night. She would listen to music and smoke a cigarette. Now, it doesn't say if she inhaled. All right. So I don't know, but she would listen to music and calm down. One of the things that I try to do in the evening, when I try to get in bed 30 minutes before I want to be asleep, and I will read because it helps me to calm down. All right. So those are some ideas for you. All right. Centenarians, that means people who live to 100 are becoming much more common. You can see that right here. The number of people worldwide that, and this was 2 years ago, the number of people worldwide that are over 100 years old is 573,000, and that's going up quite a bit. In the 90s, centenarians in Europe occurred at a prevalence rate of about 1 per 10,000, and just now, and this was 2019, excuse me, the prevalence rate has doubled. It's 1 now in 5,000. Human life expectancy has been increasing at a rapid rate. Better healthcare, better hygiene, healthier lifestyle, sufficient foods. A lot of people don't think about that. I remember very distinctly when I was in grade school and so forth, there was a lot of talk about food shortages and famines and all these things. And 3 things have happened. Make sure you can see my fingers. 3 things have happened to change that. Wheat was hybridized. The production per acre went up 10 times, 1,000% for wheat, corn, and rice due to hybridization of the crops so that they are more drought resistant and you get more yield per acre. Now, you still have to be careful about the quality of the food, but one of the things that we have now that was different 50 years ago is that there's actually plenty of food. There's improved medical care and there's reduced child mortality. All of these things will add together to increase life expectancy. But one of the things that has happened is as we're living longer, we've increased the risk for disease and disability. All right. Life expectancy is currently increasing more rapidly than healthy life expectancy. Let me get a drink of water. So what we're actually seeing is that people are living longer. Yes, we know that. But actually what is helping is people are living longer sick than they used to. What used to happen just a generation or two ago, back to what we've already talked about, is people would get sick and pretty soon they would die. Okay. Now people are still getting sick at the same age, but they're living a lot longer, but they're living sick. And that's what we don't want. We do not want to live long, but live sick. So what we want to do is we want to live long and live healthy. All right. Worldwide life expectancy is now up to 73 years, 6 years longer than it was just 20 years ago, 22 years ago. But chronic and in some cases preventable diseases is also taking a bigger toll than it was 20 years ago. So what happens now is nearly 4 in every 5 older Americans is living with multiple chronic condition. I know that my mom is 87 and she went into the doctor recently and the nurse said, "Oh, Mrs. Glenn, you didn't write down your medication." She says, "I don't have any." And she says, No, I mean the prescriptions, the things the doctor gives you to take. She says, "I don't take anything." And actually the nurse looked at my mom and she said, "That's not possible." Because we are so used to people as they get older, they start taking more and more and more medications. This is another way of looking at it. What we need to do is increase more healthy aging and increase less decline and disability. I'm going to go over here. There's one that I'm looking at. What we have here is people are living longer, but they're living sick longer. There's one that I'm looking for. You can see right here, the decline in health is sharpest when people are between 35 and 49 years old. The unfortunate thing is by the time you realize you're going to start living a long time, like once you get late 60s, mid 70s, and you start realizing, hey, I'm living a lot longer than I thought I would when I was in high school, then it becomes more difficult to roll back that biological clock, so to speak. Okay. And this has to do with cognitive changes that we're seeing. As a matter of fact, a lot of people are not aware that right now in the United States, heart disease is the #1 cause of death, but Alzheimer's and dementia is now the #2 cause of death. So one of the things that's really important is keeping your cognition as you age. We don't like seeing cognitive decline in anybody, but it actually begins in your early 50s. And people don't even think about this until they're usually late 60s, early 70s, and then they start thinking, oh, this is not good. But the time to do something is actually when you're young enough to make a difference. Now, this is a very key thing. And I remember when I first saw this study, it just jumped off the page at me. Now, follow me here. Life expectancy decreases with each additional chronic condition. Chronic conditions, what are those? Heart disease, diabetes, COPD, an autoimmune disease like Hashimoto's or something like that, okay? These are all chronic conditions. Arthritis, all right? A 67-year-old individual with no chronic conditions will live on average 22.6 years. So let me round that up to make it easy. So if you're 67 and you have no chronic conditions, your average life expectancy right now, or this was actually a few years ago when this was published, would be 90. A 67-year-old individual with 5 conditions, all right? And those conditions can be things that you never think about. Reflux, right? Oh, I've got, you've got reflux, high blood pressure, whatever. That's going to take 10 years off your life. Okay? Or 7.7. So follow this. A 67-year-old individual with 5 chronic conditions and less than 10 chronic conditions will live 7.7 fewer years. Okay? So now that person is passing away at 82 instead of 90. And somebody with more than 10 chronic conditions is looking at losing 17.6 years. That person is looking at dying in their early 70s. That's how important this stuff really is. Okay, a couple of other thoughts. Life expectancy by chronic conditions is just what we're talking about. What we do not want to do is see chronic conditions cause you to die sooner and sicker. So those are the things that we're going to be talking about in this series that I want to do. And these are chronic conditions: cardiovascular, cancer, respiratory, digestive issues, all right? Dementia, liver disease, diabetes, kidney disease, Parkinson's. Parkinson's is actually a form of dementia, and even suicide. Suicide's actually become a much bigger deal than a lot of people realize. And one of the things that makes people commit suicide is they're living long and they're living ill and they don't want to do it. They don't want to live long sick. Okay. And this is my last slide for today. The traditional annual physical examination of asymptomatic adults. This is something I went to a conference just a few months ago. And the guy was talking about this, and that is, a lot of people, they go in see their doctor once a year. They go in for their annual, right? The research and the data actually shows that the traditional annual physical examination of asymptomatic adults is not supported by evidence of effectiveness and might actually result in harm. It should not be a regular activity. There is better value in a periodic, according to risk and specific test intervals, preventive visits with a primary care health professional to provide preventive counseling, immunization, and known effective screening tests. Now, what do I mean by that? There are some really, really interesting tests that have become available just in the last couple of years. And actually, one of them that is coming on real strong is there is now a blood test that you can run. We'll do a whole episode on this particular test because it's very cool. There is a blood test that you can now run that will tell you years in advance if there is any cancer going on in the body. So you don't have to wait until it shows up on a scan. We also have tests you can run now that will tell you if there's any cognitive decline going on long before symptoms are even present. So that's my last slide here to go over today. And next week, we're going to get started talking about the things that you can do to actually live healthier and live longer. I appreciate you being here. And I'm hoping that this series that I've got planned on longevity ends up being of tremendous value to you. All right. So go on out there and enjoy your day. And I hope you got something out of this. And your feedback would be greatly appreciated. Thanks a lot. And this is Dr. Glenn, and I'll see you next week. Okay, bye.